They handed her a cardboard box and called it Mercy. Her name is Olivia Wilson, 24, black, executive secretary at Whitmore Hastings Group, the coldest tower in Manhattan. For 3 years, she wrote the reports 5 white directors signed. She stayed silent. She stayed useful. She stayed invisible. That morning, Charles Blackwood passed her in the marble corridor and smiled. "Olivia, you look so polished today, almost makes it easy to forget where you came from." She kept walking. Her badge said secretary. Her spine said something else. Nobody in that building knew about the man waiting for her at night. Kang So-jun, 29, a black dragon tattooed down the left side of his neck, hidden under an Italian collar. He offered her his name once. She refused. "If I use your name, they win before they lose." Then the board called an emergency meeting. 5 directors, 1 long table. 1 black woman standing at the door with a notepad she wouldn't need. Richard Whitmore cleared his throat. Margaret Hastings folded her hands. The word they used was cultural fit. Charles leaned back and told her she should be grateful for the opportunity she'd been given. Olivia didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She said 1 sentence back, and the silence she had carried for 3 years, the silence they mistook for obedience, cracked open right there on the 12th floor. But what happened 5 minutes after she stepped into that elevator? Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Olivia Wilson pressed the elevator button with the knuckle of her index finger. The pad print of the executive floor was oil slick from 1,000 fingers before hers, and she had stopped touching it flat 2 winters ago. The car climbed 48 floors without stopping. She used the mirrored wall to check the line of her blazer, the fall of the pearl gray silk under it, the way the secretary badge sat against her collarbone. The badge was warm from her body. She hated that she noticed. The doors opened onto the glass corridor of Whitmore Hastings Group, marble under her heels, Manhattan behind 20 feet of window. She did not look at the city. She looked at the reception desk, where Diane already had the printed agenda folded to the 2nd page, waiting. "Blackwood is early," Diane said, low. "He asked where you were." "He knows where I was. He signed the badge." Diane slid the agenda across the counter. Olivia lifted it with 2 fingers. Charles Blackwood was standing at the window at the far end of the corridor when she turned the corner. Navy suit. Suspenders the color of an old bruise. His reflection saw her before his face did. He turned with a small, tight smile she had learned to read as a warning shot. "Olivia, Mr. Blackwood." He walked toward her, unhurried, the way a man walks when the floor is his. He stopped 1.5 feet away, closer than a colleague, farther than a friend. His cologne was the same one her mother's employer used to wear on Sundays. She kept her face still. "You look well today," he said. "You look really well. Almost makes it possible to forget where you came from." She held the agenda a little tighter. The corner bit into her thumb. She held his eyes. "That's kind of you, sir." He waited for her to flinch. She did not. He nodded once, as if she had confirmed something for him, and walked past her toward the boardroom. His shoulder did not touch hers. It came close enough that she felt the wool. She let 3 seconds pass before she moved. She counted them. 1, 2, 3. Then she walked. Grace Kim was at the copier by the boardroom door, Coke bottle glasses low on her nose, a stack of quarterly reports curling in the tray. Grace did not look up from the machine. "Left hand," Grace said quietly. Olivia glanced down. Her left hand had crushed a diagonal fold into the agenda. She smoothed it flat against her thigh. "He's warming up," Grace added. "He only opens with the compliment when he plans to close with something else." "I know. Do you?" Olivia did not answer. Grace slid a fresh copy of the agenda into her hand and took the crumpled one back with a small pat, the way a mother takes a broken cup from a child before the child cuts itself. They had been doing this for 3 years. Neither of them had ever named it. Olivia's station was 2 doors down from the boardroom. A glass wall, a low desk, a chair that had never been replaced since the day she was hired. She sat. She opened the second drawer. Inside the drawer, under a stack of pale blue folders, was a smaller folder in charcoal linen. Kang So-jun had given her the folder 6 months ago, empty. He had said, "Put in it whatever you cannot afford to lose." She had put in it the first draft of every report Charles Blackwood had ever signed. She did not open the charcoal folder this morning. She only ran her thumb along the top edge. Then she closed the drawer and locked it with the small brass key she wore on a chain under her blouse. Her phone lit up on the desk. One line. "You didn't sleep." She did not smile. She turned the phone face down. She let the memory come because pushing it away was more expensive than letting it pass. The night before had begun the way most of their nights began. She had let herself into his penthouse with the code he had given her the 3rd week they knew each other, and Kang So-jun had been at the kitchen island with 2 glasses of water and no whiskey. He drank whiskey with everyone else, not with her. "You're pale," he had said. "I'm tired. Those are different." He had turned to face her, and the collar of his black silk shirt had fallen open 2 buttons, and the head of the dragon tattoo had shown itself at the base of his throat. Black ink, fine scales. The line of it went up under his ear when he tilted his head. He never hid it in the apartment. He hid it everywhere else. "They're moving on you tomorrow," he had said. "I know. I can end it tonight. 1 call. No." He had waited. She had watched him decide not to argue. "If I use your name," she had said, "they win before they lose. They get to say I never earned any of it. They get to say a man saved me. I need them to lose to me. They'll be crueler if I don't. I know. Olivia, don't." He had not said her name again that night. He had cooked her rice with egg because she had not eaten since lunch, and he had watched her eat it standing at the counter, and when she had put the bowl in the sink, he had turned her by the shoulders and kissed her forehead. Once, the way a man kisses something he has already decided to protect, whether or not she permits it. 5 minutes, he had said. "Whenever you want, I'm 5 minutes away." She had left before dawn. She opened her eyes at her desk. The clock on her monitor said 7:51. The board meeting was at 9. She began to work. The first email was from Margaret Hastings, subject line reading simply, "Agenda Update." Margaret had added a closed session at 9:45, board members only, HR present, no topic listed. Olivia copied the line into a note on her personal phone. She did not react. She replied to Margaret's email with 2 words. "Noted, Mrs. Hastings." The second email was from legal, forwarded by Grace. A single attachment. Board communication draft. Confidential. Olivia opened it because Grace had forwarded it. Grace never forwarded anything without a reason. The document was 3 pages long. It was a formal notice of termination for cause, drafted for a mid-level employee. The name field was blank. The date field said today. The signature line said Charles Blackwood, CFO. Olivia read it once. Then she read it again, slower, because her body had already known before her eyes had caught up. The language of the notice was hers. Every phrase in the second paragraph came from a memo she had written 11 months ago for a different case. Every citation in the third paragraph came from an internal audit she had drafted for Charles, because Charles did not know how to write an audit. He had signed it, he had signed all of them. She had never asked to be listed as author. That had been the arrangement, unspoken, since her first year. She closed the document. She locked her screen. She sat still for a count of 10. Then she stood, picked up the fresh agenda from Grace, and walked to the small kitchen at the end of the executive corridor. She poured herself a cup of black coffee she did not intend to drink. She held it in both hands, because both hands needed something to do. Grace came in behind her and closed the door with her heel. "You saw the draft." "I saw it. The name is blank because legal doesn't know yet." They'll know at 9:45. Yes. Olivia set the coffee down. It did not shake. She was proud of that, in a small, dry way that would not last past the elevator. Grace. I'm here. The audit language in that draft. Paragraph 3. Where did they get it? From your audit. They know it's mine. They know, they just don't care that anyone else knows. Olivia nodded. She turned to face Grace fully. How long have you known this was coming? Grace's face did not move. Behind her glasses, her eyes went a shade further inward. Longer than you have, Grace said. Not much longer. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have run to him, and you would have hated yourself for it, and I wasn't going to be the one who put you there. Olivia looked away. She looked at the window. Manhattan looked the way Manhattan always looked at 8 in the morning. Cold, tall, indifferent, uninterested in her. Grace. Yes. You don't walk into that room today as a secretary. You walk in as a threat. Grace's voice had dropped to the register she used only when she was giving instructions she would not repeat. Say that again for me. You are not a secretary in that room. You are what they are afraid of. Carry yourself like it. Olivia did not answer. She picked up the coffee she was not going to drink. She left the kitchen. In the corridor she passed Edward Preston, who did not meet her eyes, and Thomas Wentworth, who did, and gave her the small, correct nod men like Thomas gave to women they were about to help destroy. She returned the nod at exactly the same angle. At her desk she opened the second drawer again. She unlocked the charcoal linen folder with the small brass key. She took out the top document, the first draft of the fourth quarter audit, in her own handwriting on the margin corrections, dated 2 years back, and slid it into her leather portfolio, then the next one, then the next. 14 documents in total. She had numbered them, in pencil, in the top right corner, 1 through 14. She had known, without letting herself know, that she was going to need them numbered. She closed the portfolio. She closed the drawer. She locked it. She sat. Her phone lit up again. One line. Whatever they do today, remember, you are already the thing they cannot undo. She read it. She turned the phone face down. She did not answer. At 8:42, Richard Whitmore stepped out of his corner office at the end of the corridor. 3-piece charcoal suit, watch chain across the vest, gold catching the fluorescent. He walked toward the boardroom with the loose, easy stride of a man who had never been made to hurry. Margaret Hastings came out of her office a moment later, tweed the color of bone, pearl at her throat, and fell into step beside him. She said something. He laughed. Neither of them looked toward Olivia's station. Charles Blackwood came last. He walked past her desk on his way to the boardroom, and this time he slowed. He stopped, actually, and rested one hand flat on the corner of her desk, so she could see the graduation ring on his little finger and the wedding band on his fourth. Big morning, Olivia. She raised her eyes. Yes, sir. You'll be taking minutes. I always take minutes. Not always. He tapped his fingers once on the corner of the desk. The graduation ring made a small, hard sound against the wood. Not today, he said. He walked away. She waited until he was through the boardroom door. Then she looked down at the leather portfolio in her lap. She was gripping it hard enough that the leather had darkened where her fingers pressed. She let go, one finger at a time. She flexed her hand. Grace passed behind her, dropping a fresh stack of quarterly summaries on the corner of her desk. Grace did not stop. Grace only said, without turning her head, 8:57. They'll want you in the anteroom at 9:05. Not the boardroom. The anteroom. The anteroom was where they put people they were about to remove. Olivia understood. She stood. She smoothed the blazer at the hip. She checked the badge on the pearl gray silk. Secretary. She left the badge on. She walked the length of the executive corridor with her portfolio under her left arm, past the window with the view she never used, past the copier, where Grace stood pretending to sort paper, past the closed doors of men who had signed her work with their own names for 3 years. She counted her steps. She counted them because counting kept her breath at the height she needed it. 22 steps to the anteroom door. She stopped in front of it. She placed her hand flat against the wood, once, briefly, the way you place your hand on a horse before you get on. She was not asking permission. She was letting the door know she was coming through it. Inside the boardroom, on the far side of that door, the 5 of them were already seated at the long, dark table. She could see them through the narrow glass panel beside the frame. Whitmore at the head, Margaret at his right, Charles at his left, Edward and Thomas on the far side. There was no chair set for her. There had never been a chair set for her. She turned the handle. The anteroom was empty. The lights were low. On the small side table there was a cardboard box, folded flat, waiting to be assembled. She looked at the box for a long moment. Then she set the portfolio down on the anteroom table, opened it, and slid the top document out. Document 1, 4th quarter audit, her handwriting in the margin. Charles Blackwood's signature at the bottom. She placed it on top of the folded cardboard box. She sat down in the chair by the wall. She waited. Through the glass panel, she watched Richard Whitmore lean forward and say something to Margaret. Margaret laughed, the small private laugh she saved for board members. Charles poured himself water from the crystal pitcher. Edward looked at his watch. Thomas looked at nothing. None of them looked at the anteroom door. She let the door do the work of not existing for them a little while longer. At 9:04, Grace's shadow crossed the frosted glass of the outer wall. Grace did not come in. Grace only paused, briefly, and Olivia heard the sound of the small metal clip of a folder being set down on the credenza just outside the anteroom door. Then, Grace was gone. Olivia stood. She opened the door a hand's width, reached out, and took the folder off the credenza. She closed the door. The folder was thin, plain manila, no label. Inside were 3 pages, stapled once in the top left corner, and a single printed line on a post-it fixed to the front page. Read the second page first, then breathe, then walk in. She read the second page first. It was a wire transfer record, 7 figures, from a Whitmore Hastings subsidiary account she recognized to a personal holding account she did not. The name on the receiving account was Charles Blackwood. The date was 14 months ago. The amount had never appeared in any audit she had ever drafted or seen. She breathed. She read the first page. It was an internal memo, 3 months old, from an offshore counsel Whitmore kept on retainer. The memo authorized the movement of the 7 figures under a line item labeled Consulting Fee, Advisory Group Not Yet Incorporated. The advisory group had never been incorporated. The consulting fee had cleared anyway. She read the third page. It was a list, 14 line items, 14 dates, 14 amounts. The amounts totaled a number that would end a career and start an indictment. She turned the post-it over. On the back, Grace had written a second line, smaller, tighter. They filed the termination at 8:51. Legal was told to hold your name until after the room. Olivia looked up at the frosted glass. She could see the outline of Charles Blackwood through it, seated, laughing at something Whitmore had said. His hand made the small chopping motion he made when he was congratulating himself. She folded the manila folder in half, once, and slid it inside the leather portfolio. She placed the portfolio under her left arm. She adjusted the cuff of her blazer. She checked the badge on the pearl gray silk. Secretary. She left the badge on. She stood. She walked toward the boardroom door. The boardroom door was heavier than it looked. Olivia knew that because she had opened it 1,000 times, and every time her wrist remembered the weight before her mind did. She did not open it now. She stopped a step short, folder pressed against her ribs, and let the corridor swallow the sound of her heels. Inside, she could hear Charles Blackwood laughing at something Margaret Hastings had said. The laugh had no bottom to it. It was the laugh of a man who had never been interrupted. She turned left instead. The prep room was 2 doors down. That was where the meeting materials were staged the night before. Sorted, tabbed, initialed. That was her room. She had run it for 3 years the way a surgeon runs an operating theater. Nothing left the prep room until she had touched it twice. She pushed the door with her hip. The lights came on soft. 14 leather binders sat on the long walnut table, spines aligned. 14. She counted them without meaning to. There should have been 13. She set her folder down. She walked the length of the table. The extra binder was at the head, in Whitmore's seat. It was thicker than the rest. She had not printed it. She had not tabbed it. She had not left it there. She stood over it for a full breath. Then she opened it. The cover page was a quarterly restructuring proposal. Whitmore Hastings Group, Q3, confidential. She read the executive summary and stopped at the second paragraph. She read the second paragraph again. Then she flipped to the appendix, then to the risk memo, then to the mitigation strategy on page 19. Every sentence in that document had come out of her mouth. She had drafted it in November. She had drafted it in a notebook, at her desk, at 11 at night, after Charles had walked past and said the firm needed something sharper for the sole acquisition brief. He had said it like he was throwing a coin at a dog. She had written it anyway. She had written it because writing it was the only way to prove she could. She had left the finished draft on his desk in a plain manila sleeve, unsigned, the next morning. He had never mentioned it again. She had assumed it was killed. It was not killed. It was here. It was bound in leather. It had a name printed on the cover in dark ink. Charles Blackwood, Chief Financial Officer. She closed the binder. She did not slam it. She let the cover fall the way a lid falls on a jewelry box. Behind her, the door opened. "You found it." Grace Kim did not walk fully into the room. She stayed at the seam of the door, one hand on the frame, the way a woman stays who has spent 45 years learning which rooms she is allowed to be caught in. Her coke was tight against her nape. The pearl at her throat caught the overhead. She did not look surprised. "How long has this been sitting here?" Olivia asked. "Since 7. Who put it here?" "His assistant, on his instruction." Olivia turned to face her. She did not raise her voice. She had learned not to raise her voice a long time ago. Raising her voice was the door Charles Blackwood was hoping she would open. "He is going to present it," she said. "He is going to present it in 14 minutes." Olivia looked down at the binder. She lifted the front cover with 2 fingers and let it fall closed again. It made almost no sound. "How do you know I wrote it?" Grace Kim did not answer for a moment. She stepped inside. She closed the door behind her with the flat of her hand. She walked to the head of the table. She did not sit. "I have known you wrote it since December," she said. "The mitigation clause on page 19. The one about currency exposure through Incheon. Only 2 people in this building understand that clause well enough to write it that clean. One of them is retired in Palm Beach. The other is you. You could have said something. I did say something. I said it to a mirror. Then I said it to no one." Olivia's jaw moved once. She looked at the binder again, then at the clock over the door. 12 minutes. "He is not just going to present it," Grace said. She said it quietly. "He is going to present it before he presents you." Olivia's chin lifted a fraction. "Before he presents me." "There is a personnel item on the agenda. Item 7. It was added last night at 11:42. The label reads, Restructuring, Executive Support Tier. Olivia knew what Executive Support Tier meant. She had typed the phrase into 2 memos herself. It was the phrase that appeared 6 weeks before a woman like her stopped receiving parking validations. She did not react. She put her palm flat on the closed binder. The leather was cool. Somewhere in the corridor, a phone rang 3 times and went to a voicemail she would never listen to. "You knew last night," she said. "I saw the agenda change at 11:43. Why are you telling me now?" Grace Kim did not blink. She looked at Olivia the way a woman looks who has been standing in a room for a long time, waiting for the light to reach her side of it. "Because if I told you last night," she said, "you would have gone home and cried. You would have been strong tomorrow. Today, you are already strong. Today, you can use it." The word use sat in the air between them. Olivia let it sit. She walked to the window. The window was floor to ceiling and it faced south. Manhattan at 8:50 in the morning was a field of glass, throwing back a sky that could not decide whether to be gray or white. She did not look at the city. She looked at her own reflection instead. The blazer, the cream lapels, the small gold hoop at her ear, the badge on the lanyard around her neck. Secretary, printed in dark block letters over a photograph that had been taken on the third day she was hired. She lifted the lanyard off her neck. She looked at the photograph. The woman in the photograph was smiling politely at a camera she had not asked to be photographed by. That woman had already been dead for 2 years, and no one in this building had noticed. She dropped the lanyard on the sill. She left it there. "Grace," she said. She did not turn around. "Yes. Get me the December draft, the original, from the shared drive. Print it. Now." It was deleted from the shared drive in January. "Get me the version from your inbox." Grace Kim did not ask how Olivia knew there was a version in her inbox. She simply nodded once and left the room. Olivia stood at the window. She counted. She had learned to count in her grandmother's kitchen in Charleston when the pot was about to boil over. Count to 8. If the room is still on fire at 8, walk. If the room is still on fire at 16, run. If the room is still on fire at 24, burn it down. She counted to 8. The room was still on fire. She counted to 16. The room was still on fire. At 24, she turned around. The door opened. Grace Kim came back with a slim brown envelope. She placed it on the table beside the leather binder. She did not open it. "Also," Grace said, "there is one more thing you should know before you walk in." Olivia waited. Kang So-jun called the desk at 7:52 this morning. Olivia's mouth did not move. "He asked if you had arrived. I said yes. He asked if you were carrying anything unusual. I said only your bag. He said good. He said that if I saw you before the meeting, I should tell you one sentence." "What sentence?" He said, "Tell her the door on the 40th floor is unlocked. She'll know which door." Olivia's fingers curled once around the strap of her bag. She let them uncurl. She knew which door. It was the door to the smaller conference room at the far end of the executive floor, the one Kang Holdings kept a lease on, through a shell entity nobody at Whitmore Hastings had ever bothered to notice. She had walked past it every morning for 18 months. She had never once been inside. She had never once let herself want to be. He was telling her she had somewhere to go if she needed to run. She was not going to run. "Thank you, Grace." Grace Kim looked at the envelope, then at the binder with Charles's name on it, then at Olivia. "Miss Wilson," she said. She had never called her Miss Wilson before. "You do not walk into that room as a secretary. You walk in as a threat." Olivia looked at her for a long second. "Say that again." "You do not walk into that room as a secretary. The rest of it. You walk in as a threat." Olivia nodded once. Something behind her eyes rearranged itself. It was not rage. It was not fear. It was the quiet click of a lock finding the correct tumbler after 3 years of being turned the wrong way. She picked up the envelope. She picked up the leather binder. She left her own folder on the table. She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the handle. She turned her head a 1/4 inch toward Grace. "You have been protecting me." Grace Kim's face did not change. "I have been paid to protect this firm's judgment. Sometimes that has meant protecting you." "Paid by whom?" "By the man who signed my hiring letter 22 years ago." "Whitmore signed your hiring letter." "He countersigned it. He was not the one who wrote the offer." Olivia looked at her. Grace looked back. Neither of them moved. "Later," Olivia said. "Later." She opened the door. The corridor was full now. Executive assistants moved through it with the small, precise steps of women who had learned decades ago to make no sound above marble. 2 junior analysts were carrying trays of espresso from the pantry. Edward Preston passed her going the other way. He did not say good morning. He looked at the badge that was no longer around her neck, and then he looked away. She walked toward the boardroom. She did not walk faster. She did not walk slower. She walked at exactly the speed she had walked every morning for 3 years, and that was the thing that made Charles Blackwood look up when she came through the double doors. The boardroom was full. Whitmore at the head, his back to the city. Margaret Hastings to his right, hands folded on a leather portfolio she had not opened yet. Charles Blackwood on his left, jacket unbuttoned, ivy signet ring catching the overhead. Edward Preston sliding into a seat at the middle. Thomas Wentworth already seated at the far end, pen uncapped, staring at a legal pad that had one word written on it in blue ink. 5 white men and 1 white woman. The composition of every photograph that had ever been taken of leadership in this building since 1971. Olivia stopped 1 step inside the door. Whitmore looked up. He had been expecting a woman with a clipboard, ready to pass out water bottles and check the audio-visual feed. He got a woman with a leather binder in one hand and a brown envelope in the other. "Miss Wilson," Whitmore said. His voice had the small, brittle courtesy men of his generation used on women they were about to move against. "You may set the materials down and step out. We will call you if we need you." Olivia did not set the materials down. She did not step out. She walked to the sideboard along the east wall, the one that held the water pitchers. She placed the leather binder on top of the sideboard. She placed the brown envelope beside it. She did not turn around. "Miss Wilson," Whitmore said again. She turned around. She looked at Charles Blackwood. "You added an item to the agenda last night at 11:42, she said. "Item 7, restructuring, executive support tier. Would you like to present item 7 first, or would you like to present the sole acquisition strategy first?" The room went still. Charles Blackwood set his pen down. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who thought he was watching a small animal try to walk across a highway. "Excuse me," Charles said. "I am asking about the order of the agenda." "The order of the agenda is not your concern. The sole acquisition strategy," Olivia said, "is in the binder in front of Mr. Whitmore, the binder with your name on it. I am asking whether you plan to explain page 19 to the board, or whether you plan to have me removed before that page is turned to." Margaret Hastings's hand slid off the leather portfolio. It came to rest on the arm of her chair. Her knuckles were white. Charles Blackwood did not stop smiling, but the smile no longer reached the rest of his face. His eyes went to Whitmore. Whitmore did not look at him. Whitmore was looking at Olivia. "Sit down, Miss Wilson," Whitmore said. "I do not have a seat at this table." "Then, stand." She stood. The city behind Whitmore's back was the color of old bone. The clock over the door read 8:59. Somewhere 30 floors below her, a delivery truck reversed into a loading dock, and its warning beep climbed the glass tower and disappeared before it reached the 40th floor. Charles Blackwood picked up his pen again. He tapped it twice against the leather portfolio in front of him. He looked at Olivia the way a man looks at a woman who has just made the last mistake of her career. He did not know yet that the last mistake of the morning was not going to be hers. Grace Kim opened the door at the exact second the long clock in the corridor struck 10. Olivia walked in first, the folder pressed flat against her ribs, the badge still on her neck, the heels quiet on the carpet. She did not sit. She stood at the second chair on the left, the chair she had stood behind for 3 years, and she waited. Richard Whitmore came in last. He always came in last. The double doors sighed shut behind him, and the 7 directors took their seats around the long, dark table. Margaret Hastings on his right, Charles Blackwood on his left, Edward Preston, Thomas Wentworth, and 2 other men whose names had never bothered to learn hers. The glass wall behind them showed a low winter sky and a river the color of old iron. "Good morning," Whitmore said. Nobody answered. That was the ritual. He opened a leather portfolio and did not look at Olivia. He looked at a printed page and read it as if he were reading a weather report. "Before we begin," he said, "the board has one item of internal restructuring to address. Miss Wilson, if you would remain standing, please." She remained standing. Charles Blackwood smiled at his notepad. Margaret folded her hands. Grace, in the corner at the small side desk, did not move a muscle. After a careful review of the department's cultural alignment, Whitmore continued, and following a unanimous vote taken by the executive committee last night, we have decided to release Miss Wilson from her duties, effective immediately. He turned the page. It was already turned in his head before he began. "There is no accusation of misconduct," he added, in the voice of a man who wanted the record clean. "This is simply a matter of fit." "Fit," Margaret repeated, tasting the word. "Cultural fit," Charles said, as if translating for someone slow. Olivia set the folder on the table, not on her chair, on the table, in front of Richard Whitmore. She slid it 2 inches toward him and let her fingertips linger on the corner. "You said unanimous," she said. Whitmore lifted his eyes. "The vote," she said. "You said unanimous." "That is correct." "When was it taken?" He blinked. He was not used to being asked when. "Last night." "At what hour?" Margaret laughed a small, dry laugh and turned to Charles. Charles did not laugh. He watched Olivia the way a man watches a lock he can no longer open. "Miss Wilson," Whitmore said, "this is not a hearing." "No," she said. "It is a firing." "I am asking when it happened." "Around 9. I was in this building until 9:30, she said. "I locked the executive floor. The board did not meet on this floor last night." The vote was conducted by phone. By phone? Yes. With all 7 directors. Yes. She nodded once, very slowly, and she looked at Edward Preston, who was the man who never spoke. And Edward Preston looked down at the grain of the table, as if he had discovered something interesting there. "Edward," she said, "you were on a plane last night. You landed at JFK at 11:42. Your driver called me at 8 to confirm the pickup." Edward Preston's throat moved. "Miss Wilson," Whitmore said, "the internal procedure is not the subject of this meeting." "No," she said, "the subject of this meeting is me. And I am telling you the vote you say was unanimous cannot have been unanimous, because one of the 7 directors was over the Atlantic." Thomas Wentworth looked at Charles Blackwood. Charles Blackwood looked at Richard Whitmore. Richard Whitmore looked at Margaret Hastings. Margaret Hastings looked at nobody, because Margaret Hastings did not need to look at anyone to know when to speak. "Olivia," she said, in the warm voice she used on the wives at the Christmas party, "this is not personal. This is a business decision. You have been a lovely assistant for 3 years. Secretary. I'm sorry? You said assistant. My badge says secretary. If we are going to be honest for the last time in this room, let us use the right nouns." Charles Blackwood set his pen down. "You should be grateful," he said, "for the opportunity you had." The room went very quiet. Olivia turned her whole body to him. Not just her head, her whole body. She unclipped the badge from the strap around her neck. She held it between 2 fingers, and she did not throw it. She set it on the table in front of Charles Blackwood, next to his coffee, gently, the way a mother sets a spoon in front of a child. "Charles," she said, "say that sentence again, slower." He did not. "You should be grateful," she said, saying it for him, "for the opportunity you had. Say who gave it to me." "The firm." "Who is the firm?" "The board." "Name a member of the board who hired me." He opened his mouth. He closed it. Grace Kim, in the corner, moved her hand 3 inches on the desk, which, for Grace Kim, was the same as another woman standing up and cheering. "You didn't hire me," Olivia said. Whitmore Hastings had a diversity headcount to meet in 2023, and human resources filled the number. "You never chose me. You inherited me, and for 3 years you have been trying to figure out how to send me back." "Miss Wilson," Whitmore said. That is enough. It is not enough. It is not close to enough. She opened the folder. She had rehearsed opening the folder in the elevator for 11 floors, and the folder opened the way she had rehearsed it. She removed the top page. She placed it in front of Richard Whitmore, facing him. He looked at it without touching it. It was the Meridian brief, his signature at the bottom, her handwriting in the margin. You presented this to the Meridian board in February, she said. You were paid a $900,000 success fee. You wrote the cover memo. I wrote the 14 pages behind it. That is a serious accusation. It is not an accusation. It is a receipt. She removed the second page, Charles Blackwood's signature, her margin notes. Halberd Industries, she said. August. Third page. Coastway, October. 4th. Tri-River Holdings, November. She did not stack them. She placed each page across the table like tiles on a board, one in front of each director. Edward Preston did not touch his. Thomas Wentworth turned his over. Margaret Hastings picked hers up and read the first line and set it down as if it had been warm. You are telling us, Margaret said, that you wrote these. I am telling you I typed them, drafted them, revised them, and formatted them. Charles printed them. Richard signed them. Edward carried them into the meeting. Thomas took the credit at the follow-up call. That is not writing. That is delivery. You had a role, Whitmore said carefully. I had the role. You had the letterhead. Charles Blackwood put both hands flat on the table. He was a man who used his hands to push things when he did not have arguments. Miss Wilson, you are being dismissed for cultural fit, not for competence. Nobody is disputing your competence. You are disputing nothing, she said. You are removing me because a competent black woman inside your walls is a mirror, and you have been avoiding mirrors for a long time in this room. Grace Kim did not smile. Grace Kim never smiled at work. But something in the corner of her mouth held very still, which for Grace Kim was the same as applause. Enough, Whitmore said. He stood. Sit down, Richard. He sat. He did not know he was going to sit, and then he sat. He sat because for a second, a single second, the room had a center of gravity, and it was not him. He did not understand what had happened yet. He would understand it 2 hours later, when his phone rang. But right now, he only knew that he had stood up and been told to sit down, and his knees had obeyed a secretary. Margaret felt it too. She adjusted her pearls with 2 fingers. Olivia, she said, even if what you are claiming is true, this is not the forum. There are proper internal channels. You are turning a routine transition into a scene. A scene. Yes. Margaret, you have known my name since 2023. In 3 years, in this building, on this floor, with your office 30 feet from my desk, you have called me Olivia 4 times. You called me sweetheart. You called me dear. You called me the girl. Once, at the Christmas party, in front of Mrs. Hendricks, you called me the help. 4 times you called me Olivia. I counted. Margaret's mouth opened a 1/4 inch. Nothing came out. That is a scene, Olivia said. The scene has been going on for 3 years. Today you are just watching the last act of it, because today I am no longer required to be quiet through it. She did not raise her voice at any point. She had learned in her first year that a raised black woman's voice was the only argument these men needed to erase everything she had said before it. So she spoke the way Kang So-jun spoke, low, steady, as if the sentences were already true and she was merely reading them back. Charles Blackwood tried a different angle. Olivia, he said, using her first name for the first time in 3 years. Whatever grievance you have, we can discuss privately. We can find a graceful exit, a recommendation letter, a generous package. You are a young woman. You have a career ahead of you. Do not burn a bridge you might need to cross again. She looked at him for a long moment. Charles, 2 weeks ago, at the Reed dinner, you introduced me to your wife as the girl who fetches the coffee. Your wife shook my hand, and asked if I liked working for such distinguished gentlemen. I said yes. I said yes, because I was working. I was carrying the halberd contract in my bag. The contract that paid your bonus, the bonus that paid for that dinner. Charles Blackwood's face went a color that had no name. That is the bridge you are asking me not to burn, she said. I would like you to look at it, really look at it, and tell me if it was ever built for me to walk on. He did not answer. Whitmore tried to reclaim the room. Miss Wilson, we appreciate your service, but this meeting is concluded. Grace, please escort Miss Wilson to her desk. She has 15 minutes to collect personal effects. Security will meet her at the elevator. Grace Kim did not stand. Grace, Whitmore said. I heard you, Richard. She had never called him Richard. In 7 years, she had called him Mr. Whitmore. She did not stand. She wrote something on the pad in front of her, and she set the pen down horizontally across the pad, which was a small, precise gesture, the gesture of a woman closing a chapter she had been paid to keep open. Whitmore looked at her, then at Margaret, then at Olivia, and something in his face made a small, unfamiliar movement, the movement of a man realizing he does not know the shape of his own room. I said 15 minutes. You said a lot of things this morning, Richard, Grace said quietly. Most of them were incorrect. The silence that followed was the silence Olivia had been walking toward for 3 years. She let it sit. She let it sit for a full 4 seconds. 4 seconds in a boardroom is a life sentence. She looked at each of the 7 directors in the order they had voted: Whitmore, Margaret, Charles, Edward, Thomas, and the 2 men whose names she still did not need. Then she reached for the badge on the table. She picked it up. She unhooked the lanyard. She placed the plastic card in the center of the table, name up, and she pushed it 2 inches toward Richard Whitmore with 1 finger. You wanted this, she said. You can keep it. I was not carrying it for me. Charles Blackwood, who could not stop himself, tried one last swing. You should be grateful, he said. The sentence a reflex now. The sentence a man says when he does not know he has already lost. You had opportunities. Most girls like you never get. Dignity has to be earned, Miss Wilson. It is not handed out to whoever demands it. She turned to him, very slowly. Charles, yes. Dignity is not something that was ever in your hands to hand out. She let that land. It was never yours to give me. It was never yours to take. You have been sitting in this chair pretending you owned it because nobody in this room ever told you the truth about your own furniture. Every contract you signed for the last 3 years, I wrote. Every strategy you took credit for at the Reed dinner, I built. Every closing you toasted at the Yale Club, I closed. And every morning I came in early and stayed late, and said good morning to a receptionist who was told to look through me. That is what dignity looks like. It does not have your signature on it. Nobody moved. The silence I kept for 3 years, she said, was not respect. It was strategy. It ended 2 minutes ago, and what you are looking at now is what it turns into when it does. Margaret Hastings tried to lift her water glass. Her hand did not fully commit to the lift. She set the glass back down and pretended she had not reached for it. Richard Whitmore straightened his papers. Miss Wilson, he said. His voice had a small hairline crack in it now. The decision stands. You are dismissed. Please leave the boardroom. I will, she said. She turned to Grace Kim. Grace, thank you. Grace nodded once. Olivia turned back to the room. She did not gather the pages she had placed in front of the directors. She left them on the table. She left the badge on the table. She left the folder on the table. She left everything in that room that had belonged to Whitmore Hastings, and she walked toward the door with nothing in her hands. She stopped once, halfway, and turned back. Richard! He lifted his eyes. You said this was a matter of fit. Yes. When your phone rings today, she said, and it will ring today, please remember which one of us did not fit. She turned and she walked out. The door closed behind her with the small, polite click of a door that had been designed to close politely. Inside the room, no one spoke. Charles Blackwood picked up the page in front of him, the Halberd brief, and he read the first paragraph. He knew that paragraph. He had read that paragraph aloud in September to a room of investors and taken a standing ovation for it. He set the page down. Margaret Hastings turned to Whitmore. "Richard, not now, Margaret." "Richard," I said, "not now." Edward Preston, who had not spoken all morning, cleared his throat. "The vote," he said quietly, "was not unanimous." Everyone turned to him. "I abstained," he said. "You told me it did not matter because there were still 5. That is what you told me on the call. Edward, I would like the minutes to reflect that. There are no minutes. Then I would like there to be minutes." Charles Blackwood laughed. It was not a real laugh. It was the sound a man makes when his own hand betrays him. "Gentlemen," he said. "Ladies, we are getting ahead of ourselves. This is a housekeeping matter. The girl is out of the building in 15 minutes. Whatever documents she produced can be handled by legal. We move on." Nobody moved on. Grace Kim, in the corner, wrote 3 more words on her pad, set the pen down again, and looked at Richard Whitmore for the first time all morning. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, the honorific back, the honorific now a small blade, "you have a call at 11, from the Kang Holdings legal office in Seoul. The confirmation came through my desk at 7 this morning. I had assumed you had been told." Whitmore's face did not move. That was worse than if it had moved. "Kang Holdings," Margaret repeated. She did not know why she was repeating it. She only knew that she had heard the name in a Financial Times headline last week, and that the headline had been about acquisitions. "Yes," Grace said. "Kang Holdings." Down the hall, the elevator doors opened for Olivia. She stepped in alone. She pressed the ground floor. The doors closed, and in the polished steel of the wall, for 1 second, she saw her own reflection. No badge, no folder, no title, and she did not look away. The elevator did not move for 4 seconds after the doors closed. Olivia counted them. She had learned to count small things when large things were being done to her. The cardboard box in her arms held almost nothing. A ceramic mug with a chipped rim. A framed photograph of her mother in a nurse's uniform, taken the year before she died. A dry pen that had stopped writing months ago, kept for reasons she could no longer remember. The rest of what she had built in 3 years lived on servers behind passwords she had already been locked out of. She did not cry in the elevator. She had promised herself, in the 7 seconds between Whitmore's signature and the walk to her desk, that she would not give them that. 1 tear had slipped anyway, on the ride down, when the doors closed on Charles Blackwood's smile. She had wiped it with the back of her wrist and pressed her wrist against the cool steel wall until the skin stopped burning. The lobby was the worst part. Marble floors reflected everything, and everyone in the marble saw a black woman with a cardboard box being escorted out by security. The 2 guards walked a step behind her, close enough to make it a spectacle, far enough to pretend they were not part of it. She knew both their names. She had brought them coffee last Christmas. Neither of them looked at her. Her heels clicked across the marble in a rhythm she could not slow. If she slowed, the guards would slow, and slowing would look like hesitation. If she sped up, she would look like she was fleeing. She held the box against her chest and walked at the pace of a woman leaving a meeting on time. At the revolving door, one of the guards finally spoke. "You take care, Miss Wilson." She stopped. She turned her head half an inch. She said nothing. He looked at his shoes. The revolving door pushed her out into a wind she had not dressed for. She had left her coat on the back of her chair on the 38th floor. Someone would fold it neatly by tomorrow and drop it in the mail, or someone would throw it in the trash. It did not matter which. She stepped away from the tower and did not look up at it. She had spent 3 years looking up at that tower. She was done with that angle. The box was heavier than it should have been. She set it down on the low granite ledge of a planter and took out her phone. Her hand was steady. She noticed that. She had expected a tremor. She scrolled to a name she had never dialed from a public place. Kang, S. She had saved him under the initial. She had saved everyone under initials. It was a habit from a life where a screen glimpsed from behind could ruin you. She hesitated with her thumb over the call button. Not from doubt, from the size of what the call meant. The night before, in the penthouse, she had told him she would not use his name. She had said it standing at his window with the city under her like a spilled tray of light, and she had meant it. She had meant it the way people mean the vows they make to themselves in the dark. And now, 13 hours later, standing on a sidewalk with a cardboard box at her feet, she was about to break the vow. She pressed call. He answered on the first ring. He did not say hello. Where are you? They fired me. Silence. Not empty silence, the silence of a man who had already known and was waiting to hear her voice arrive at the fact. Where are you standing? He said again. In front of the tower, 53rd, West Side. Wait 5 minutes. He hung up. She lowered the phone. She looked at the screen until it went dark, and then she put the phone in her coat pocket, and then she remembered she had no coat, and she put it in her jacket pocket instead. She sat down on the granite ledge next to her box. She crossed her ankles. She kept her back straight. 5 minutes. Across the plaza, tourists were photographing the tower. A woman in a red hat was pointing up at the 40th floor. Olivia watched her point and thought, calmly, that the 40th floor had a boardroom where 7 people had just voted to erase her. The woman with the red hat did not know. The woman with the red hat thought the building was beautiful. It was beautiful. That was part of the problem. A shadow crossed the marble in front of her. She looked up, expecting Sojun. It was Grace. Grace Kim was not wearing her coat either. She had walked out of the tower in her office clothes, off-white blazer, buttoned wrong at the middle, glasses slightly crooked, a slim leather folder pressed against her ribs the way a person carries a thing they are afraid to drop. Her breath came fast. She had run down the stairs, 12 flights at least. Olivia understood that instantly and did not comment on it. Sit, Olivia said. Grace sat. She placed the folder on the granite between them. Her hands stayed on it for a moment before she let go. Everything is in there, Grace said. Her voice was even. Her shoulders were not. The 14 reports Charles put his name on. Emails from Margaret to the offshore firm in Grand Cayman. The invoice trail from the Whitmore Foundation to the Shell in Delaware. 6,600,000. Over 4 years. Names, dates, wire numbers. Olivia did not touch the folder yet. How long have you had this? 19 months. Olivia turned her head slowly. You waited. I was told to wait. The city noise widened around them for a moment. A bus hissed. A cyclist swore. Somewhere above, a window washer's platform hummed against the glass. Told by whom? Olivia said. Grace did not blink. By the man who put me in that seat 4 years ago. Olivia felt the sentence arrive in stages. First the words, then the shape, then the weight. She kept her face still, because keeping her face still was the only skill she had refined enough to trust today. Grace. Not here. Grace slid the folder half an inch toward her. Take it. He will come. When he comes, get in the car. Read it there. Do not read it on the street. Olivia looked at the folder. She did not pick it up. Who put you there? Grace's mouth opened. Grace's mouth closed. A black car turned the corner of 53rd and slowed at the curb. He is here, Grace said. She stood up. She adjusted her glasses. She did not look back at the tower. Miss Wilson. Olivia stood too. The box was at her feet. The folder was in her hands now, though she did not remember picking it up. Grace. Grace paused a step from the curb. She turned only her head. He will explain what he can, she said. The rest is not mine to give. She walked past the black car without looking at it, and disappeared into the crowd on 6th Avenue. In 3 seconds, she was gone. Off-white blazer swallowed by winter coats. The rear door of the car opened. No driver got out. Seo Jun opened it himself from the inside and did not step out. He leaned across the seat and looked up at her. His tie was loose, one button undone at the collar, and the black lines of the dragon showed at the base of his throat. "Get in." Olivia bent for the box. "Leave it. It has my mother in it." He looked at the box for 1 second. Then he got out of the car. In a coat that cost more than her severance, in shoes that clicked once on the sidewalk, he crossed the 2 steps to the ledge, lifted the box in one hand, as if it were empty, and carried it to the trunk himself. He did not ask a driver to do it. She stood on the sidewalk and watched a man who had bought companies for breakfast carry her chipped mug and her mother's photograph like the fragile things they were. He held the rear door for her. She got in. The door closed. The car pulled into traffic. The tinted glass cut the city down by half, and the noise dropped away, and for the first time since she had entered the boardroom that morning, she felt her shoulders drop an inch. Seo Jun did not touch her. He sat with his hands flat on his thighs and looked forward. "Read it," he said. "I will not talk while you read." She opened the folder. The first page was a memo she had written 8 months ago on how to renegotiate the Argentine timber contract. The header had been redacted with white tape and re-signed with Charles Blackwood's name and initials. She turned the page. The second was another memo she had written. The third was one she had written and forgotten. The fourth, the fifth. On the 7th, her own handwriting appeared in the margin of a printed page. A note she had made in blue ink one night at 11, and above it, in different pen, Charles's initials next to a comment she had never seen. "Keep her drafting these, she does not know what she is worth." She kept turning. The reports ended at 14. Then came the fraud. The first email was from Margaret Hastings to an address at a firm in Grand Cayman. The second was an invoice from the Whitmore Foundation for $1,400,000, marked services rendered, with no service specified. The third was a wire confirmation to a Delaware LLC whose sole listed officer was a man named Preston, Edward Preston, the COO, the silent one. Grace had put yellow tabs on 17 pages. Each tab bore a small handwritten letter in Grace's careful script. The letters, in order, spelled 2 words. Olivia read them twice before she understood what the 2 words were. "For you." She closed the folder. The car had crossed 6 blocks. The driver, up front, whose face she could not see through the partition, had made no turns she recognized. Seo Jun had not moved. "You had this," she said. "I knew it existed. You did not give it to me. It was not mine to give." She looked at him. He looked back. The dragon on his neck moved with his throat when he swallowed. "Grace works for you. Grace works for my father." She let that land. She let it stay in the air between them for the length of 1 full breath. How long? She was placed 9 years ago, before I met you, before you existed to me. Why? He turned his head to the window. The glass reflected his jaw and half of hers. My father did business with Richard Whitmore in the 90s. He watched him build the firm on ledgers that never balanced. When Whitmore refused a partnership, my father put a person inside. He is patient in a way I am not. You knew she was there when we met. Yes. You knew she was watching me. I asked her to. He said it without softening it. She respected that. She hated it and she respected it, and she noticed that she could hold both of those at once without her hands shaking. For how long? Since the night you told me you would not use my name. Her mouth almost curved. Almost. I told you that last night. You told me the version of that last night. You have been telling me that for 2 years. Every time I offered anything, in any form, I asked her to make sure you were safe while you kept refusing me. Safe? Not helped. Safe. She looked down at the folder in her lap. They fired me for Engage Cultural. They fired me 2 hours after I refused you again. Explain that. I cannot. You cannot, or you will not. I did not know today would be today. I knew today would come. I did not know the hour. The car turned. She did not know onto what. She did not care yet. Where are we going? Wherever you want. She almost laughed. It came out as a single hard breath through her nose. I want to go to my apartment. I want to put on clothes I chose. I want to take a shower. Then I want to sit at my kitchen table and read this folder from the first page to the last. Then that is where we are going. He said something in Korean to the driver, a short, quiet phrase, and the car changed lanes. She looked at the folder again. She looked at her own name, printed under Charles's, on the first stolen page. Seo Jun. He turned. This morning, at 7:41, you told me to wait 5 minutes. You said it before I told you I had been fired. He did not answer immediately. He did not pretend he had misheard. Grace called me at 7:38, he said. She was watching the badge system. Your access was revoked at 7:36. She knew before you did. Olivia looked at her lap. You knew before I did. I knew you were about to know. And you did nothing. I let you walk out on your own feet. If I had come sooner, they would have said Kang Holdings interfered. They would have written a story where you were carried out. I wanted the story to be that you carried yourself out. She was quiet for a long time. The car crossed a bridge she did not name. You were writing a story, she said at last. I was letting you finish one. They are not the same thing. No, they are not. He did not argue with her. He looked at her hand on the folder, and he did not touch it, and he did not touch her. Something in her chest unspooled a quarter turn. She did not thank him. She would not thank him for this. Not yet, not today, maybe not for weeks. But she understood, and understanding was already a kind of weight moving in her. At a red light, her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Unknown number. She let it ring. It stopped. 10 seconds later, it rang again. She answered. Miss Wilson, a woman's voice she did not know. Older, precise. This is Amelia Reyes, from Carter and Vale. We have been retained on behalf of a client to inform you that as of 11:42 this morning, 62% of the voting shares of the Whitmore Hastings Group were transferred to a holding company registered under the name of Kang Holdings International. Your former employer no longer belongs to your former employer. Olivia held the phone very still against her ear. Miss Reyes. Yes. What time did you say the transfer closed? 11:42. 22 minutes ago. Olivia looked at Seo Jun. When did you sign? She said. Not into the phone. To him. 6 weeks ago, he said. The closing was scheduled for today at 11:42. Whether they fired you or not. Whether you called me or not. Whether you ever spoke to me again or not. She put the phone back to her ear. Miss Reyes, where do we go from here? That is up to you, Miss Wilson. The client would like to hear your instructions when you are ready. The client asked me to say one sentence to you first. Go on. The client says, you were never their secretary. They were only holding the desk for you. The line went quiet. Olivia lowered the phone from her ear. She did not put it away. She looked out the window at a city that was still the same city and was not. Take me to the tower, she said. You said you wanted to go home. I did. I changed my mind. He did not smile. He did not perform triumph. He leaned forward 1 inch and said something in Korean to the driver. And the driver turned the car in a slow, wide arc that pointed them, again, at the 40th floor. Olivia set the folder on her lap. She rested one hand on top of it. She kept the other hand loose at her side. The tower rose in the windshield, glass on glass, sky on sky. She looked up at it for the last time from below. Charles Blackwood was already laughing when the elevator doors opened on the top floor. It was the laugh of a man who thought the hard part was over. Margaret Hastings walked beside him, her tweed skirt clean and pressed, her pearls flat against her collarbone. Richard Whitmore came last, slower, one hand still on the elevator rail, as if the ride up had taken something out of him. "That went better than I expected," Margaret said. "That went exactly how it was supposed to go," Charles answered. He was still laughing. Richard didn't say anything. He kept walking. Edward Preston was already inside the boardroom when they came in. He had removed his jacket and hung it over the back of his chair, and he was pouring water from the crystal decanter into a short glass, slowly, the way a man pours when he doesn't want to spill on his cuff. Thomas Wentworth stood at the window with his hands in his pockets and looked at the city as if the city had done him a personal favor. "Where is she now?" Edward asked, without turning around. "Downstairs," Charles said. "Security took the box for her. She'll be off the property in 10 minutes. Good." Margaret pulled out her chair and sat. She crossed her legs at the ankle and folded her hands on top of the table. The long table gleamed under the cold light. 12 chairs, 5 men and 1 woman around it now. The remaining 7 chairs empty, and the emptiness felt like a decision. "I want the press release out by 4, Margaret said. "Neutral language, restructuring, culture, nothing personal." "Nothing personal," Thomas repeated from the window. He said it the way a man tastes a word. Richard finally sat. He unbuttoned his suit jacket and let it fall open. He took the glass of water Edward had poured and drank half of it without stopping. "Something the matter?" Margaret asked. "No." "You look like something is the matter." "I said no." Charles reached across the table and clapped Richard on the shoulder. He clapped him twice, hard, the way men clap other men when they want to be told they're winning. "Come on," Charles said. "This is the day, Richard. This is the day we've been waiting for. 3 years of that woman writing my reports for me. 3 years of pretending I didn't know she was the one doing it. That's done. It's done. It's done," Richard said, quietly. Margaret watched him. Her green eyes were narrower than she meant them to be, and she made herself relax them. "Richard," she said, "we have work to do this afternoon. If you're going to be sentimental about a secretary, I need to know now. I'm not sentimental about anything." "Good." Edward finally turned from the water. "Are we drafting the internal memo now or after lunch?" "Now," Charles said. "I want it in every inbox before the market closes. Tomorrow morning, I want the analysts calling to congratulate us on discipline." "Discipline," Thomas said, still at the window. He said it again. He liked it. Charles pulled his phone from his jacket pocket and set it face down on the polished wood, next to his coffee cup. He straightened his tie. The regimental stripes caught the light. He looked at his own reflection in the tabletop for a second longer than necessary. "Gentlemen," he said, "and Margaret, to a company that finally knows what it is." He raised his water glass. Edward raised his. Thomas raised his from the window. Margaret lifted hers. An inch, no more. Richard didn't lift his. Charles paused. The glass hung in the air. "Richard." "I'm drinking it," Richard said, and drank it. He did not raise the glass first. Charles laughed again, but it was thinner now. He set his glass down. "All right," he said. "Business." Margaret uncapped her pen. She opened her leather portfolio. She began to speak about the press release, about the wording, about the calls that would come from the 2 board members who had not been in the meeting and who would need to be managed. She spoke in short sentences. She had done this before. She had done this in 3 previous corporate purges over 20 years, and each one had ended with her sitting in this same chair, drafting the same kind of memo, and each time she had been correct. She trusted the shape of the day. Thomas came from the window and sat. He listened. He nodded at the parts he was supposed to nod at. Edward took notes on a legal pad in his round, careful handwriting. Charles interrupted twice, both times to make the language colder. Only Richard was silent. He kept looking at the door. "Are we expecting someone?" Margaret asked. No. Then look at me when I speak. Richard looked at her. His eyes were the color of a swimming pool in November. He held her gaze for a moment, and then his gaze slid past her, back to the door. The clock on the far wall moved from 12 minutes past 2 to 13. Charles's phone buzzed once on the table. A short buzz. A message, not a call. He did not look at it. The clock moved to 14. The wording on the last paragraph, Margaret was saying, I want it softer. Something about legacy. Something about honoring the transition. Honoring the transition, Edward wrote down. Charles's phone buzzed again. Twice this time. Then again. Then it began to ring. The ring was loud in the room. Charles frowned. He picked it up. He glanced at the screen and set it back down face up. Investor relations, he said. They can wait. It rang out. Edward's phone, in his jacket pocket on the back of the chair, began to ring next. Edward reached back without turning and silenced it through the fabric. Margaret's phone, from her handbag beside the chair, chimed, then chimed again, then began to ring. Thomas's phone, on his belt clip, buzzed. The 4 phones did not stop. Margaret finally leaned down and looked at her screen. Her face did not change. Her face was trained not to change, but her hand, on the leather of the handbag, tightened. What is it? Charles asked. I don't know yet. You're looking at your phone. I don't know yet, Charles. Richard's phone had not rung. Richard's phone was the desk phone in front of him, the black corporate line, the one that only rang for board matters and for emergencies. He looked at it, and it was quiet. Then it rang. It rang the way corporate desk phones ring, a low double tone, twice, and again twice. Every head in the room turned. Even Charles stopped moving. Richard let it ring a 3rd time before he answered. Whitmore. He listened. The room listened to him listen. His face did not change at first. His face was the face of a man who had answered 10,000 phone calls in his life and had learned to give nothing away. Then, very slowly, the color left it. It left the top first, the forehead, then the cheeks. His mouth stayed the same shape, but the mouth was the only thing that did. Say that again? He listened. Say the name again. He listened. His free hand, the one not holding the phone, went flat on the table, palm down, fingers spread. It was the hand of a man trying to hold on to a table. When he listened, and it's already filed. He listened. I see. He set the phone down. He did not hang it up cleanly. The receiver landed at an angle on the base and rocked once. The dial tone came on, low, at the edge of hearing. He did not fix it. Richard, Margaret said. He did not answer. Richard, look at me. He looked at her. His blue eyes had gone gray. What was that call? The company was sold this morning. Silence. Not the silence of not hearing, the silence of hearing and refusing. Margaret spoke first. That's not possible. It was filed at 9:40 this morning. The public disclosure went out to the exchange at 9:44. It's on the wire. Legal called to confirm because they thought I already knew. Sold to whom? Edward asked. His voice, for the first time all afternoon, had a shake in it. Richard did not answer immediately. He looked at his hand on the table. He did not lift it. Richard. Kang Holdings, he said. Charles laughed. It was a reflex, not a reaction. Kang. Kang who? There is no Kang on our shareholder list. There is now. They bought 62%. 62, Margaret started, and stopped. 62.4, rounded down. That's the number legal gave me. That's controlling interest. That's controlling interest, Margaret. I know what 62% is. Thomas, from his chair, said, Wait. 62% doesn't move without us knowing. 62% moves through the board. Through us. That's how the structure works. We would have seen the paperwork. We would have signed the paperwork. They didn't need us to sign anything, Richard said. How? Because they bought it from the outside, piece by piece, over months, through instruments we don't monitor, through shells. Legal is still tracing the transactions, but the aggregate is confirmed. 62.4%. Voting shares, under one holder. Under one holder, Margaret repeated. Kang Holdings. Nobody moved. Edward's pen was still resting on his legal pad, where he had written the words honoring the transition. The ink had bled a little where the nib had stopped. Charles picked up his own phone. He looked at his screen. The messages had piled up. He scrolled. His face changed the way Richard's had changed, from the top down. It's on Reuters, he said. Nobody responded. It's on Reuters, and it's on Bloomberg. It's on our own damn wire. There are 12 missed calls from investor relations. There are 7 from legal. There is 1. He stopped. There is 1 from Michael Rowe, personal cell. Michael Rowe was the chief general counsel of the parent company. Michael Rowe did not call personal cells. Michael Rowe had a person whose job was to call cells for him. Return it, Margaret said. I'm returning it. Charles stood up. He walked to the far corner of the boardroom, near the credenza with the crystal decanter. He put the phone to his ear. He listened. The rest of the room listened to the shape of him listening. His shoulders, which were the shoulders of a man who had rowed in college 40 years ago, dropped a full inch. They dropped and did not come back up. He said one word. He said, understood. He said it twice. He came back to the table. He did not sit. It's real, he said. We know it's real, Charles. It's real and it's clean. Rowe says the filings are airtight. The instruments are legal. The disclosure timing is legal. The purchase price cleared the exchange this morning at 9:40. There is no procedural angle. No procedural angle, Margaret said. None. Thomas put both hands flat on the table and looked down at them. Kang Holdings, Margaret said again. She said the name like a woman checking whether the shape of it had changed since the last time she had said it. Who is Kang Holdings? Kang is a Korean surname. There must be 20,000 Kang holding companies on the planet. Which one is this? Richard did not answer. Richard! He looked at her. Then he looked at his hand on the table, and he lifted it, slowly, and set it down again. Say it, Margaret said. Kang So-jun, Richard said. The name landed on the table like a stone. Kang So-jun, Margaret repeated, carefully. Kang So-jun. That name. Where do I know that name? You don't. I know that name from somewhere. You don't, Margaret. You've never met him. But someone has. Richard did not answer. Charles, still standing, said, Wait, 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 Kang So-jun. That is the boyfriend of... He did not finish. He did not need to. Margaret finished for him, and she finished for him slowly, one syllable at a time, as if she were reading a sentence written on a wall she had walked past 1,000 times without ever bothering to read. That is the boyfriend of the woman you just walked out of this building. Silence. Edward's pen rolled a 1/4 inch on the legal pad and stopped against the crease. Thomas's forehead touched the back of one of his own hands. Charles's mouth stayed open a moment longer than any mouth should. Richard closed his eyes. How do you know his name? Margaret asked. She was not asking Richard, she was asking Charles. Charles didn't answer. How do you know his name, Charles? It came up. When did it come up? It came up in the diligence. 6 months ago. There was a photograph. It came up in the background file. On her. We had the file done on all the executive assistants. You remember. The file. The security file. There was a photograph of her. At a restaurant. Downtown. With a man. The file had a name on it. Kang. Some Kang. We didn't look. We laughed. We laughed at the file. I remember. Richard, you were there. You laughed at the file. Richard opened his eyes. He looked at Charles. I remember the file, Richard said. You remember it? I remember it, Charles, Margaret said, very quietly. And nobody checked. Nobody answered. Nobody in this room checked who the man in the photograph was. Nobody answered. Nobody checked because Margaret paused. She was, for the first time in the 20 years she had sat at this table, choosing her words in real time. Nobody checked because it did not occur to any of us that the man in the photograph could be someone. It didn't occur to us, Charles said. His voice had gone flat. It didn't occur to us, Margaret said, because of what she is. Margaret. That is what I am saying, Charles. I am saying it out loud so we all hear it once. It didn't occur to us that a woman like that could be with a man who could buy this building. Margaret, Edward said. It was not a defense, it was almost a prayer. I am not being sentimental, Margaret said. I am being clinical. We made an assumption. The assumption is now sitting on 62.4% of our voting shares. Charles finally sat down. He did not pull the chair in. He just lowered himself into it. So what happens now? Thomas said. He did not phrase it as a question. Nobody answered him. Richard reached across the table for the water pitcher. His hand was shaking. He did not try to hide it. He poured the water. He drank it. He set the glass down. What happens now, Richard said, is that at some point in the next hour, or the next day, or the next week, we are going to be called into a room, and someone from Kang Holdings is going to sit across from us, and that person is going to tell us what happens now. They can't fire us, Charles said. They can't fire us. We have contracts. We have severance. We have... They can do whatever they want, Richard said. That is what 62% of the voting shares means, Charles. You have sat on this board for 11 years. You know what 62% means. Charles didn't answer. They can fire us, Richard said. They can rescind our stock. They can pull our indemnification. They can freeze our accounts, pending an internal review. They can open the books on anything they want, and they can find whatever they want to find. There is nothing to find, Margaret said. Richard looked at her. He looked at her for a long time. Margaret, he said, gently, there is always something to find. Margaret did not answer. The desk phone in front of Richard began to ring again. Same double tone, same low ring. Nobody moved to pick it up. It rang. It rang. It rang. Answer it, Margaret said. I'm going to. Answer it, Richard. He picked up the receiver. He said his name. He listened. His color, which had come back a little, went again. He set the receiver down more carefully this time. They want us in the boardroom, he said. We are in the boardroom. Not this boardroom. The main one. 67th floor. In 1 hour. Who? All of us. All of who? All of us, Richard said. The 5 who were in the meeting this morning. Us. Us. Margaret. The 5 of us who walked her out of this building. Nobody spoke. Somewhere down the hall, an elevator chimed. The chime carried through the closed door and into the room, and it was the smallest sound in the world. Charles put both hands on his face and left them there. Margaret picked up her pen. She looked at the notepad in front of her, at her own handwriting, at the words, "Nothing personal," in her own thin cursive at the top of the page. She looked at it for a long moment. Then, very slowly, she drew a line through it. She drew the line again, and again, until the words were gone under the ink. Down on the street, 67 floors below, a black car pulled up to the curb of the tower. It was a car nobody in the boardroom would ever see arrive. It was a car with tinted windows and a driver who did not step out. It waited at the curb with the engine running. Inside the tower, on the ground floor, a man in a charcoal suit walked past the security desk without showing a badge. The 2 guards at the desk looked up, and one of them stood, and the man in the charcoal suit lifted one hand a 1/4 inch, and the guard sat back down. The man walked to the private elevator. He pressed the button for the 67th floor. The elevator doors closed on him. In the boardroom, 67 floors up, the desk phone began to ring again. This time, nobody moved. The phone kept ringing. Whitmore stared at it, as if the ringing itself had teeth. Margaret folded her hands on the table, one thumb rubbing the other in small circles she couldn't stop. Charles had gone somewhere near the window and was pretending to read something on his cufflink. Edward Preston had not moved in 4 minutes. Thomas Wentworth's tie was crooked. Nobody fixed it. The line went dead. Then it rang again. This time it was Margaret who reached for it. She lifted the handset like it might bite. Her voice came out thinner than she meant. Boardroom. Silence on the other end. Then a woman. Calm. Efficient. Unfamiliar. "This is legal counsel for Kang Holdings. I need to speak to Mr. Whitmore, Ms. Hastings, Mr. Blackwood, Mr. Preston, and Mr. Wentworth, all 5 of you, on speaker." Margaret's hand shook. She pressed the button. "Ms. Olivia Wilson is on her way up. She will arrive in the boardroom in 90 seconds. You will remain seated. You will not speak until she does." The line clicked off. Whitmore's face went from red to a color that had no name. Charles turned from the window. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Sit down, Charles," Margaret said. He sat. The elevator chime traveled through 67 floors of glass and marble and reached them like a small bell in a large church. Then the doors of the boardroom opened, and Olivia Wilson walked in, carrying the same cardboard box she'd carried out. She placed it on the long table, slowly, center, between Whitmore and the empty chair Charles had left. The box made a soft sound against the wood. Nobody breathed. Grace Kim entered behind her. She was carrying the leather folder from the elevator. She set it on the table and stepped back 1 pace. That was all. Olivia did not sit. She looked at Whitmore first, then Margaret, then Charles, then Edward, then Thomas. She took her time, each name inside her head, each face registered, each memory kept. Then she opened the box. The first thing she took out was a picture frame she had cleared from her desk 20 minutes earlier. She put it face down beside the box. She reached in again and lifted out a stack of paper bound with a rubber band. She placed it on the table. She reached in again. Another stack. Another. 14 in total. She counted them silently as she laid them down in a straight line. Charles's eyes moved from stack to stack. He knew the covers. He knew the tabs. He knew his own signature on the tops. Olivia opened the leather folder. "You wrote none of these," she said. Her voice was low. It did not rise. It did not need to. Not one. Not one paragraph. Not one line. She turned the first report so Charles could see the cover. Blackwood, December, cross-border compliance. 3rd page, 2nd paragraph. That sentence about the Singapore subsidiary. I wrote it on a Tuesday. You were in the Hamptons. Charles's throat worked. Whitmore. She turned to him. January. Board memo on the pension restructure. Every line. Whitmore did not answer. Hastings. March. The compensation review that recommended raising your own salary by 17%. Every line. Margaret's lips parted. Preston, May. Q1 audit summary. You didn't even change the footer. Edward looked at his hands. Wentworth. June. The strategic outlook that got quoted in Bloomberg. All of it. Thomas's mouth was a line. Olivia opened the leather folder wider. She took out a second set of documents. Thinner, older, colder in tone. Bank slips. Wire receipts. 2 signatures at the bottom of each. Whitmore. Blackwood. And these, she said, are the transfers from the fund you told the board didn't exist to an account in the Caymans that carries your daughter's maiden name, Charles, and to an account in Liechtenstein that carries your late brother's, Richard. $6.4 million. Over 4 years. 211 separate transfers. The room made no sound. Whitmore stood up. His chair scraped. His voice, when it came, was hoarse. You cannot speak to me like this. I am the president of this board. Olivia looked at him. You were. She let the words sit. She let it work. The company was sold this morning at 6:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Kang Holdings acquired 62% of the voting shares from 3 private holders you never bothered to court. Kang Holdings owns this room. Kang Holdings owns this floor. Kang Holdings owns the chair you are standing in front of. Whitmore reached for the back of the chair to steady himself. His knuckles went white. And Kang Holdings, Olivia said, has appointed a new executive president. She did not say who. She turned to Grace. Grace stepped forward and set a manila envelope on the table beside the 14 reports. The envelope was plain, Pardo, no seal. Olivia did not open it yet. You expected me to explain how a Mafia name landed on the shareholder ledger of a Wall Street holding, she said. You expected the story to be sudden. It wasn't. She let her fingers rest on the top report. 2 years ago, I sat in a room like this one and watched 5 of you cancel a contract that would have kept 1,100 people employed in a plant in North Carolina. I couldn't stop it, but I moved 3 clauses from that contract into 3 smaller deals. I kept them alive. I never signed my name. Someone noticed. Whitmore's breath came out uneven. That someone, Olivia said, spent months figuring out who kept saving the deals you were too lazy to save. He found me. He didn't tell me. He watched. He watched for 1 year and 8 months while you built the memo that fired me this morning. He bought the shares while you were writing the recommendation letter you tore up an hour ago, Richard. He owned this building before you finished your coffee today. Margaret made a small sound, not a word, a breath escaping. And Grace, Olivia said, without turning her head, was placed in this office 9 years ago by his father, not to spy, to watch over one thing at a time until the right thing needed watching. You never suspected the woman who brought your tea. You never suspect the ones who bring you things. Grace did not smile. She only looked at Whitmore, steady, patient. The door of the boardroom opened again. 2 lawyers entered, charcoal suits, silent shoes. One carried a folder, the other carried 5 envelopes. Mr. Whitmore, the first lawyer said, your position as chairman is terminated, effective 7 a.m. this morning. Your severance is void under the moral turpitude clause you signed in 2019. The board has referred the wire evidence to the U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District of New York. He set the first envelope in front of Whitmore. Ms. Hastings, terminated. Same clause, same referral for the compensation manipulation. Envelope. Mr. Blackwood, terminated. Same clause. Additional referral to the SEC for the Singapore filings. Envelope. Mr. Preston, terminated. Cooperation offer attached. Contingent on full disclosure by 5 p.m. today. Envelope. Mr. Wentworth, terminated. Cooperation offer attached. Contingent on full disclosure by 5 p.m. today. Envelope. The 5 envelopes lay on the table like small white coffins. Charles was the first to break. He rose. He walked around the table. He stopped 2 feet from Olivia. Please. His voice cracked in the middle of the word. Please. I have a family. 2 daughters. My youngest has a heart condition. Olivia looked at him. She did not step back. She did not step forward. I know, she said. I sent her a card at the hospital in April. You didn't sign it. I did. From the department. You never asked who wrote it. Charles's face collapsed inward. Don't destroy me, he said. Please. Olivia's voice, when it came, was almost soft. I'm not destroying you for revenge, Charles. He waited. I'm destroying you as a matter of pattern. So the next black woman who walks into a boardroom in this city carries less of what I carried. So the next one after her carries even less. Your ruin isn't personal. It's structural. That's what makes it useful. Charles turned toward the window. He did not walk to it. He stood, halfway, one hand on the back of a chair. His shoulders shook. Once, twice. Then he stopped himself. Old training. It kicked in later than he expected. Margaret rose then. She lifted her envelope with 2 fingers, as if it might stain. She looked at Olivia and opened her mouth. "Don't," Olivia said. Margaret closed her mouth. "You don't get the last word today. None of you do." Whitmore was still standing behind his chair. He had not moved. The whiskey glass on the credenza behind him caught a slat of afternoon light and threw it against his cheek. He looked at Olivia the way a man looks at something he cannot name and cannot fight. "How long?" he said. "How long did you know?" "Since 9:47 this morning," Olivia said. 51 minutes after you signed my dismissal." He nodded once, slowly, as if to a fact he had already accepted somewhere lower than his mind. The lawyers stepped forward and, one by one, they escorted the 5 out. Not roughly, not gently. They opened the door. They waited. Whitmore went first, then Margaret, then Edward, then Thomas. Charles was last. He did not look back. The door closed on soft hinges. The boardroom held only Olivia and Grace. Grace let her breath out, small, long, the breath of a woman who had held a shape for 9 years and could finally rest her shoulders. "You did well," she said. Olivia did not answer for a moment. She was looking at the 14 reports on the table, then at the box, then at the picture frame face down beside it. She picked the frame up. It was a photo of her grandmother on the porch of a house in Alabama, taken in 1974. She looked at it for a long time. "She used to say the worst part isn't being pushed out," Olivia said. "The worst part is coming back and pretending you were always allowed in." She placed the frame upright at the head of the table, where Whitmore had sat. Then she opened the manila envelope. Inside was a single sheet of thick cream paper. The letterhead was new. 2 names in dark ink, side by side. Wilson Kang Advisory Group. Under it, 1 line in a serif face. Olivia Wilson, Executive President. Under that, in smaller ink, a handwritten note. She recognized the writing. She had studied it once, at 3 in the morning, from a letter he'd left on her nightstand. "I bought it to stop watching you get robbed. You were always the real owner of this company." She read it twice. She folded the sheet in half. She placed it inside the leather folder. She closed the folder. Grace watched her. "He asked me to tell you he'd be downstairs when you were ready," Grace said. "He said not to hurry. He said he'd wait as long as you needed." Olivia nodded. She looked out the long wall of glass. The city stretched south to the harbor. She had crossed it every morning for 3 years to sit at a desk outside this room. Today the room belonged to her. "Grace," she said. "Yes. Draw up a list. Every person in this building who was told they didn't fit. Everyone with a warning letter for something that would have been called Initiative on Charles or Thomas. Everyone the HR office marked as not aligned with culture. I want the names on my desk by tomorrow morning." "Yes." "And the plant in North Carolina. Buy it back. Whatever it costs. Reopen it. I want the 1,100 jobs back by end of quarter." "Yes." Grace paused at the door. "There's one more thing." Olivia looked up. "The board. What's left of it? There are 3 seats to fill by Friday. Fill one of them yourself." Grace's mouth turned up at the corner. It was the closest thing to a smile she had shown in 9 years. "Yes," she said, and she closed the door behind her. 2 weeks later, the story broke. Not through a press release, through a leaked filing, then a second filing, then a Bloomberg alert, then a Times profile with a photo of Olivia standing at the window of the boardroom, one hand on the back of the chair Whitmore had stood behind. The caption ran below the fold. "The secretary who came back as the woman who owns the table." Whitmore's arraignment was set for a Tuesday. Hastings's for the Wednesday after. Blackwood's lawyers filed for postponement 3 times. Each time the postponement was denied. Preston and Wentworth took the cooperation offer. Their testimonies filled 48 pages. The wire transfers, all 211 of them, were entered into the record with matching bank confirmations. The account in Liechtenstein was frozen on a Thursday, the account in the Caymans on a Friday. Charles's daughters kept their tuition paid. Olivia had made that call quietly on the second day, through a foundation that no one traced back to her, because destroying a man's daughters was not what she meant by pattern. The company changed its name in the third week. Wilson Kang Advisory Group. The old Whitmore Hastings crest came down from the lobby wall in a Sunday morning nobody watched. In its place went a plain brass plate with two names, nothing more. Grace was named Vice President of Legal Affairs on a Monday. She wore the same pearl at the same collar. She did not change offices. She said the corner office was too much light for a woman who had spent 9 years learning to read a room from the middle of it. The press wrote what the press wrote. Most of it was ugly. Some of it was fair. Olivia did no interviews. She said one sentence, once, to a reporter who caught her on the sidewalk outside the building. "I'm not the story, the building is." The reporter printed it anyway. That night she went home to the penthouse, not to her old apartment. She had not been there in weeks. The old apartment was being packed up by a service. The doorman still called her Ms. Wilson. He did not know yet that the elevator he pressed for her every morning led to a floor that was hers now too. Kang Seo-jun was standing on the terrace when she came in. He had not turned around. He knew her step. He had known it for 2 years and 8 months, and had chosen, for most of them, to say nothing about how well he knew it. She crossed the room. She did not take off the blazer. She stopped beside him. The city was low with autumn light. The river ran slow. The bridges held their lamps. She wore a light blue blouse under the blazer, silk, short sleeves, a soft collar. She had put it on that morning because it was the blouse she wore on the first night she'd told him no. He took her hand. For a long time neither of them spoke. There was nothing to fix. There was nothing to explain. There was a city below them and a company above them, and a pattern that would take another 20 years to break, and they had made a start. "They threw me out as a secretary," she said. He looked at her. His voice, when it came, was as low as it had always been. "You came back as the woman who owns the table." She did not smile. She did not need to. The wind moved once against the terrace glass. The city held its breath, the way cities do at that hour. Somewhere 67 floors up, in a room that had held her silence for 3 years, the 14 reports were being logged into evidence one by one, and the chair at the head of the table stood empty, waiting for her to sit in it the following morning. She looked at him. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," he answered. The light dropped one shade. She did not let go of his hand. The city, for the first time in a long time, felt like a room she had been invited into on her own name. If you want to watch all the stories without any ads and also get access to bonus scenes, extended epilogues, and exclusive spicy chapters, head over to our Patreon. Scan the QR code on the screen. The link is in the description or in the pinned comment. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever built something for years while wearing a badge that said you didn't belong in the room? Have you ever been told to be grateful for the crumbs of a table you were quietly holding up? And when the truth finally sat down at that table, did you speak or did you keep taking notes? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, silent power, and awakening, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.